Welcome to the podcast about Tatars in Poland. I am Maurits Berger, Professor of Islam in the West at Leiden University in the Netherlands.
And I am Ewa Górska, an assistant professor at the Digital Justice Center at the University of Wrocław in Poland. Together we'll explore the history, identity and traditions of the Tatars, the Muslim minority that has lived in Poland for around 600 years. Our quest will take us to remote parts of Poland, but also into libraries and into meetings with Tatars from all walks of life.
Our question is, who are the Tatars in Poland and how do they carve out their lives in Polish society? And is Islam here in Poland different from somewhere else? These are more than academic questions. They are also questions about the ways that Muslims are part of Europe.
This is episode 4, Religion or Culture?
After all our findings and meetings, I want to refocus on what we had set out to do. Discover who the Tatars of today are. They've lived here since the 13th century, that is 700 years, and that makes them the oldest native Muslim community in Europe. But that also raises questions about the Islam that the Tatars practice. Has it changed during the centuries that they lived here, cut off from the Islamic heartlands? That seems to be so. The Tatars have religious customs that are different from the Muslims in the Middle East and Western Europe. And that is something we want to explore further. However, Islam turns out to be only one part of being Tatar. There's also an ancient heritage that they are proud of. They like stories about the Tatars from long time ago, who were masters of the horse and the bow and arrow. And on festivals, they reenact that with ancient costumes and all. But the question, who is Tatar, depends on who you talk to. Someone like Róża, for instance, Róża Chazbijewicz, who leads a theatre and dance company. And Róża, well, she has a specific view on what a Tatar is.
Tutaj w tym przypadku można mówić o tym, że to jest pochodzenie tatarskie, tak? A jeżeli chodzi o...
If we talk about being a Tatar, well, it's a gene issue here as well. It is the blood of generations, even when it is being mixed with others. And there is, of course, also the question of upbringing in the Tatar culture. As for religion, well, here religion is really by choice. You can change your religion, you can't change your Tatar blood, and it kind of sets you apart. So when it comes to Tatar culture and being a Tatar, you are a Tatar. You can't write it off or change it. But when it comes to religion, well, we see that Tatars are of other faiths. Here, in Poland, we are born most of the time into Muslim families, as it were. So the religion of us, Tatars, is Islam. However, we also see many mixed marriages, and often the children are being baptized, so we now see in Poland both Christian and Muslim Tatars. But what unites us is that we all remain Tatar.
I asked Róża what exactly her foundation does.
Fundacja, taką fundamentalną rzeczą, na której nam zależy, to jest...
We want to preserve our culture and hope that by doing so, that people will stop mixing our blood. That is the only way our community can survive. And to do so, we focus on the younger generation. And in doing so, we hope that they themselves want to remain as a community with this culture and with this Tatarness.
And is the younger generation interested?
There is little interest. We therefore see a huge role for parents. It is they who bring up their children in Tatar culture from a young age. The youngest group that we work with are those of 7 years old. With music and trips and all kinds of activities, we hope to instill in them a sense of where they come from.
This conversation is taking place in the tourist place in Krusieniany, opposite the wooden mosque that we had visited earlier. And the talk is all in Polish. So after a few minutes, I excuse myself and wander off to the little museum that is part of this building. And there I discover something I'd only been reading about in academic articles: Tatar prayer manuals. I'm very, very excited. Now call me a nerd, but this is thrilling. I'm looking at little books, old books, that are almost falling apart. They're Tatar prayer manuals. They're handwritten, so it's not always easy to read, and they're written in Arabic. Now, I do know Arabic, I read Arabic, but here are texts I cannot decipher. I see the Arabic letters, but the words make no sense. And that's the exciting thing. These words that are written in Arabic script are not Arabic. They're Belarusian or Polish. And what all this tells us is that the Tatars lost their own language very quickly after they settled in Lithuania and Poland, and then switched to Lithuanian, Belarusian or Polish. But in their religious texts, they kept the Arabic script, because that was the script of Islam. When Eva had finished her conversation with Róża, I called her over and showed her the prayer manuals. I randomly read out the text without understanding what it was saying. But then Eva interrupted me. "That is hepatitis in Polish," she said. Hepatitis. Ah, but then I understand. In Polish, it says that this is a prayer book for the sick. And in this case, it is those who are sick with hepatitis. And then follows the Islamic prayer. I am completely fascinated. I could spend all day here. But Eva drags me along. We have another meeting with 3 elderly ladies, and one is the president of the Tatar Association in this region, and the other 2 are members and friends. And there we will hear more about the prayer manuals and Tatar Islam.
Ja jestem prezesem tego uniwersytetu i jestem prezesem Związku Tatarów, oddział Bohoniki.
So after the introduction and tea, I want to start with the question that has troubled me since my discussion with Róża, or maybe even from the beginning of our tour. Can one be a Tatar and not be a Muslim?
Takiego przypadku przynajmniej nie słychać.
To be honest, we usually don't hear of anyone being that way. A Tatar not being a Muslim? I think that cannot be.
Nie wiem, tak mi się wydaje, że to raczej jednoznaczne.
But then she is interrupted by her friend.
Chyba różnie.
I think it varies. Like, in my case, I have 3 sons and 2 married Catholic women, and my grandchildren are growing beautifully, and I am proud of them, but they are Catholic. The children of my Muslim son are being raised as Catholics. Only one son married a Tatar woman, but all the children know they are Tatars.
The conversation gradually moves to what it means to be Muslim. And we hear some interesting things about how these Tatar women practice their Islam.
Przede wszystkim to jest tak, Tatarzy jak osiedlili się już w Polsce.
You must understand that Tatars and Catholics lived together next door to each other. They met and the Tatars took over some of the Catholics' customs. But the Tatars knew what Islam was. They all believed in Allah and they knew the Islamic holidays. But I remember that in the 80s, an imam came from Yugoslavia, from Sarajevo, and he began to teach the children the Islam how it's supposed to be, without the stains. But we still burn candles during Ramadan, and we also burn candles for the dead. And on Bayram, we go to a cemetery and we have a procession with the candles, with the imam in the lead, to honor the dead.
Ale to
przyjęte
wszystko...
od katolików właśnie te świeczki.
No.
The ladies cannot explain why they have these rituals and whether they are Islamic or Catholic. It is clearly not their expertise, and they also do not seem to mind. So the conversation quickly moves back to what they are mostly busy with: Tatar culture.
Piszemy dużo projektów, ja piszę dużo projektów.
What our association does is to spread Tatar culture. We write a lot of project proposals to get funding. The biggest event we have is Navroz. That is a Tatar Spring Festival.
Spotykamy się, bo to jest tatarskie święto wiosny Navroz.
Tatar bands come from Lithuania. Before they also came from Russia and Belarus, but not since the war with Ukraine. That is very unfortunate. And we also invite people to show other cultures like Catholic, Orthodox, Jewish and Roma. We do that to show our culture against the background of other cultures in this region.
Pokazujemy naszą tradycję, naszą kulturę.
Ewa and I had agreed that she would not translate during the discussion so that there would be no interruptions. But then one of the ladies digs up a little booklet from her bag and hands it to me. I understand you know about Islam and that you read Arabic, she says, and I thought you might find this interesting. It was one of those little prayer books, not from a museum, but from her home, where she is still using it. I started to read aloud so that Eva could pick up what I said, but Eva did not understand a word. The woman laughed. The language I was reading in Arabic script was not Polish, she said. It was Ukrainian, because the book was from her mother, who was originally from Ukraine. You know what I find so fascinating with the Tatars is you can never say when they are. I mean, this to me, everyone is Polish. They're not standing out.
Yeah, you don't really see the difference.
These were blonde ladies. Well, I mean, they were awfully blonde, but they could be, it's anyone's grandma.
Exactly, and I think this is one of the characteristic things. Like, this is a minority that has been here for hundreds of years, and they are Polish, actually, from my perspective. If you look closely, you can start to see who might be Tatar or not. You might see some lines in their faces. I know. Yeah, that's how you would say it.
Okay. Well, I don't see that. I find it very interesting, and it's still because they keep on talking about it's either ethnic or religious.
I'm so confused still. I know we mentioned that before, and I thought after a few of those interviews that would become clear for me. Or I thought I would know something from the books I've read before, but I'm actually still pretty puzzled because, so they say to be Tatar you have to be Muslim. They say religion and culture or ethnicity would be the same thing. But then when they talk about what they organize, about the festivals or other stuff, they either talk about religion or they talk about culture.
It's like folklore.
It's
almost
like folklore, and it sounds secular.
But it's the same thing with the booklets, because I'm fascinated by, as you know.
Yes, you are.
Those prayer books and these old Qurans and all of that. But for them, it's like artifacts. It's like something from their past. It's their ancestry. To me, the way they talk about it, these are not religious books. These are part of their ancestry.
So what I hear is them talking about their families and the past of their families. It's not even ancestry in a meaning of, a whole group or a community or being part of this minority, but it's about their families. They talk about their mothers and grandmothers using them. And I think it's also very personal. So it's not really only about religion and culture and cultivating that, but it's also about cultivating your roots and being part of a bloodline, but it's also about personal relations.
I'm fascinated by these historical backgrounds, but we must be careful not to draw straight lines from the past to the present. In the case of Poland, for instance, there have been more than 40 years of communist rule, whereby religion was almost stamped out. We know that the Catholic Church bounced back big time, but that seems much less the case with the Tatar Muslims. A young Polish scholar who has done a lot of research in the lives of Tatars today is Michał Wyszczarz, a sociologist from Olsztyn University. He comes over to our hotel, where we have a lengthy conversation with him in a quiet corner. He makes us stop the recording every 5 minutes because he does not want to jeopardize his good relations with all the players in the Tatar community, who he knows personally. Still, he shares a lot of insights from years of observation that help us understand more of what is going on. And one of the things he says is about the double religious cultural identity of the Tatars.
Ministerstwo Spraw Wewnętrznych i Administracji.
It is also a money thing. To boost their activities, whether these are religious or cultural, they need funding. And the Ministry of Interior does give money, but only for national ethnic minorities. They can apply for funds to maintain their ethnic identity. So officially there is money for Tatars, but not for Muslim Tatars. And so, what the religious associations of the Tatars do is that they apply for funds for cultural activities. Because for them, culture and religion are overlapping, so that is easily done. The Karaite Jews in Poland do the same. These two minorities are the only ethnic communities in Poland who receive funds that are earmarked for cultural activities, but that in fact also work for the religious identity.
I kulturalną, bo to jest ważne dla zachowania właśnie tej tożsamości.
Okay. So here we see a typical example of how the state influences the shaping of identity. If there had only been state funds for religious identity, I'm sure that would have been the card played by Tatar Muslims and Karaite Jews, and religion would have been given much more emphasis. But there are only funds for cultural activities, so basically, if they want to survive, then that is the road they must take. But there is more. Listen to Michał.
Tak, Tatarzy, będąc właśnie Polakami, tymi Polakami kulturowymi, Polakami z obywatelstwem.
Being Tatar is not only about religion or culture, it is also about being Polish. Because there are quite some anti-Islamic sentiments in Poland, but they're not directed to the Tatars. Islamophobia in Poland is mainly of a racial nature. It is connected with the Arab, and an Arab is stereotypically perceived as a potential terrorist. The Tatars are outside this pattern. They're not the target of Islamophobia. And Tatars know this, and they make a point of showing their patriotism, for instance by emphasizing the historical contributions to Poland, like their participation in the Polish army. And that is one of the reasons that we see how Tatars are focusing on the history and folklore. It is a trend of the past years. Tatars in Poland are not only associated with Islam, but also with the whole repertoire of associations with the steppes.
Z czymś odległym, właśnie takim niesamowicie też może nawet i dzikim.
With Asia, with something distant, something very distant, perhaps even wild. And for this, they do not mind taking culture and history a bit broadly. For instance, in Kruszyniany that you visited, the Tatars have the Sabantui celebrations. These are festivities from the Crimean Tatars, but they find that okay. They believe that we Tatars are members of this broad Tatar ethnos, or of the Turkic peoples in general. The Tatars are taking advantage of this because they are aware that people want to see it, that people might like it.
Etnosu tatarskiego, czy też w ogóle tych ludów turkijskich. Oni to w pełni akceptują.
And so we see the development of tourism in Podlasie, the promotion of Tatar gastronomy, and mind you, it is not only to promote their culture, but also to support themselves, to support their family. Because that is something else we need to understand about the Tatars. They have very strong communal ties, family ties, even ties that we can call clan ties. Because it's not only the family understood as the closest family, but these are clans, often extended clans. This kind of solidarity has also always been present among the Tatars, and still is.
Ta taka solidarność wewnątrz klanów, ona jest obecna, była obecna i pewnie będzie obecna.
But there still is the question about what religion means to being a Tatar. And Michał gives us yet another nuanced insight.
Tatarem, muzułmaninem jest po prostu Tatar, który został azaniony. To, że on do meczetu nie chodzi, to, że on nie praktykuje.
For Tatars, a Muslim Tatar is simply a Tatar who has undergone the azan, that is the Muslim baptism. The fact that he does not go to a mosque, the fact that he does not practice, the fact that the Ramadan does not matter much to him is not a reason for excluding him from the community. It is enough that he keeps in touch, so to speak, with his family, comes to the mosque those 2 times a year for Bayram. That is enough, and he will be treated as ours. If he is not religiously zealous, so to speak, God will judge what will happen to him. Because the Tatars here also have a Middle Eastern approach to this, an approach which says that it is God who judges our religiousness.
No to już tylko, że tak powiem, Bóg, prawda, Inshallah decyduje, jak to będzie wyglądało. Czy on zostanie...
Let me tell you something. I know of cases of Tatars who come from the recovered lands, the western lands, the northwestern lands of our country. These are Tatars who were born just after the Second World War into the families of those settlers who populated those western lands, mainly military families. These were families who had been brought up in an absolutely secular way, without any contact with religion, without azan, and at a certain point in their lives as adults, they would go to the east, to Podlasie, to the historical Tatar place of Bohoniki, to perform this azan, to become Muslims. And what's interesting is that these people were accepted by the community as those who had returned to the community, so to speak. Now, mind you, this is not the same as a religious conversion. It is more like coming back to the community.
To nie jest to samo co konwersja, kiedy my zmieniamy religię.
The Tatar Muslims in this part of the world are an interesting community, that much is clear. And with interesting, I mean in all aspects, historical, social, religious, cultural. But the more I learn, the more confused I get. They speak of themselves as being Tatar in culture and Tatar in religion. Scholars and academics speak about Tatars in terms of ethnic and religious minorities. So far, so good. But then, many of the Tatars we have been talking to said that Tatars can only be Muslims. And that is what confuses me. Because if Tatar is an ethnicity that can be traced back to the Tatars of the Mongol Golden Horde, then how can such ethnicity disappear with a conversion to another religion? This looks very much like being Jewish. You do not have to be religious to be Jewish. But if you convert to another religion, well, then you're not Jewish anymore. This may seem strange to the average European today, for whom religion is like a jacket that you can put on or take off. But we are here talking about religious cultures that are rooted deeply in ancient history. And for them, the jacket and the body are one and the same.
This podcast was hosted by Maurits Berger and Ewa Górska. Sound editing by Tomasz Stankiewicz, tostanki.pl. Voiceover Natalia Orkisz-Plebanek and Zbigniew Lecznar. Music in this podcast series is by Ensemble Peregrinus, which recreated traditional Tatar music, and by the Arab artists Sabri Mosbah, Tamer Nafar, Ghalia and Youssef Kehia.